valuing in of itself a commitment to the survival and thriving of other bodies. And so Black women like Reverend Mama Sandra are at the forefront of preserving Black cultural heritage spaces in Detroit. In a period of rapid gentrification of the city, there have been institutions in existence prior to this new emergence of people coming in for cheap property, right? That forced Detroit open with a sense of capitalistic gain. At the Hush House Community Museum and Leadership Institute, Mama Sandra encourages nation building while using mothering as a form of leadership. Thank you. So, yes.
Okay. So I'm looking at something I'm calling Black redemption in the Black metropolis as a way of considering creative spirits in Detroit and as it engages protecting self in the Black soul within the context of cultural heritage and Black community. Right? Thus, this Black redemption concept comes out of the enormous Marcus Garvey footprint when he urges African American masses to emancipate themselves from mental slavery. Psychological liberation from the bondage of racial inferiority. Bob Marley takes up this cause and uses the same words from Garvey's speech as lyrics in his well-known song, Redemption Song. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery, none but ourselves can free our minds. So African redemption, the UNIA's political program, meant correcting the past wrongs of colonization over the minds, souls, lands, and bodies of the African diaspora, and with it, the spiritual redemption of Black people. Garvey saw Africa as having fallen from a past greatness that had to be restored for people of African descent to resume their rightful place in the world. Such redemption can only be achieved by Black peoples themselves. This restoration process was key to Black psychological health and the integrity and dignity of the Black soul and the Black self. For Black nationalism, this meant subscribing to values of Black self-sufficiency, Black self-determination, and Black independence. Under Garvey's influence, redemption was a conservative articulation of freedom and liberty for the excluded Black people in which God took center stage. Thus, about African descendants in the Americas finding their own place in the sun. In this article, Search for Black Redemption, John E. Rowley takes up Black redemption to represent spiritual fulfillment in the return to ancestral spaces or ancestral scenes, and as a psychological movement as well as a socio-geographic movement for the migrated masses who migrated to the northern urban centers, African Americans who migrated to northern urban centers, as you know, throughout the process of the Great Migration, right? What this meant also is that many Black people carried their African heritage identity in their unconscious being and in their folk art as an expression of their fundamental self and as an outlet for their Black soul. Through the enterprise of artistic and creative production rooted in our African heritage, we fight or rebel through celebration for the reclaimed dignity of our African past. The creative production that arises from this self-reuniting becomes a means of Black salvation, Black restoration, and Black redemption. Langston Hughes' 1920s manifesto also helps translate this redemption focus, whereby Hughes exclaims, "We younger Negro artists intend to express our dark-skinned selves without fear or shame. We younger Negro artists intend to express our dark-skinned selves without fear or shame." Black shame is the operative point here, as Hughes recommends when guiding the Black creative spirit. Our need to reconcile the shame of a slave past has created an existential prerequisite for questions and problems concerning identity. Who are we really? Philosophy. who or what do we follow as our guidance systems, methodology? How do we study and speak about ourselves? And culture. What is our culture? And what are the historical roots and aesthetics that make up African American culture? Another piece of this redemption significance can also be found in Jean Toomer's poetic verse in Song of the Sun from Cain, when Toomer announces, quote, "Thy son I have returned to thee," end quote. Though it is late, in the hours beyond the shame of the slave past, there is still time, quote, "to catch my plaintive soul." Plaintive here meaning sorrowful. So in this thematic through line, the artist, heritage worker, academic is tasked with achieving a unity with his African and early slave ancestors and finding inspiration for his or her own forms of redemption songs or redemption works, and tasked with at the same time of finding a place for himself or herself in the spiritual, political, economic, sociological, and nutritional, because we need to be on this new nutritional thing now, as well as cultural fulfillment of Black people. This Black redemption urban development became a custom of the Black creative spirit and its investment in Black cultural heritage, foundationally rooted in Pan-African scripts, emerging also as Black political urgency in places like Detroit, Chicago, Cleveland, Philly, and others. So overall, my niche tackles how Pan-Africanism matters to urban transformation in the ways that it restores the vital health and heartbeat of Black life, Black identity, and the Black psyche's adaptive measure. I assert these modes of Black redemption are maintained through a number of Pan-African institutions or entities in Detroit, which account for the landscape of what I call Black placemaking in Pan-African Detroit. I argue Black urban spaces like Detroit are guided by select Pan-African tropes as their core value system, which I suggest indicate a common frequency of Pan-African script to Black life in ways that also regenerate Black creative spirits and protect the Black self and the Black soul. My creative background is rooted in the performing arts as a young person, where I did dramatic performances, first in the Festival for the Performing Arts as a part of the Detroit Council of the Arts youth program. This formative training later progressed into other thespian types of creative production. But a major hub for these performances all took place at the African World Festival, when it was located downtown in Detroit Hart Plaza. And of course, now there's this current controversy that's been brewing over the last 3 years under this Detroit gentrification process and white resettlement takeover to move the African World Festival back downtown. You know, we're gonna see how that turns out. So this part of my Black cultural heritage and artistic groundings happened under the direction of the late Motown great Kim Weston, and also the late Clifford Fears of Alvin Ailey fame. You might be familiar with Kim Weston doing duets with Marvin Gaye in the post-Tammy Terrell era, or more recognizably in her version of the Black national anthem that they played on Black radio back in the 70s and 80s. So there are these Black hidden gems of Detroit's Black metropolis that were part of the revitalization infrastructure before the white narrative of revitalization came along and banished them to the shadow worlds. These hidden gems represent a cultural, political, and economic socialization frequently rooted in Pan-African tropes that define both the cultural and psychological soul of Black geographies like Detroit. The ongoing legacies that gave way and continue from Charles Wright Museum of African American History, the Shrine of the Black Madonna, the bookstore, the African World Festival, and Nandi's Knowledge Cafe, another place I did my research at, help us continue to really understand what Black cities like Detroit are about and verify as a continual utility of Pan-Africanism, even when people want to fabricate a discourse that Pan-Africanism is dead, and also want to come after Afrocentrics by throwing shade on them and calling them things like hotels. So altogether, these indications exemplify what I call the redemptive valorization of persistent Black creative spirits in Detroit. Moreover, when we truly look at the life post generated from these protective spirits of cultural heritage, art, and community, it also can help drive back these overly crime-emphasized narratives of Black death as a methodology of how we see, misjudge, or study Black urban progress, especially under this white-led takeover or white sociology as we've known it from the 1920s. So the continuity of Black cultural heritage preservation in Detroit indicates a strong racial conscience of self-determination through Black placemaking processes instilled with a continual program of African heritage redemption. A major functionality of this Black city characteristic can be found in its healing and protection mission, wherein it helps heal and protect the Black self and the Black soul from bombardments of white supremacy trauma. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. I mean, I'm at the end anyway. Thank you much.
So I have just a few follow-up questions for Dr. Hunt and Dr. Radney, and then we will, open it up for questions. My first question is for Dr. Hunt. You you've created your own organization, the New Works Writer Series, and Dr. Radney was discussing this element of spiritual redemption of Black people within the art and culture of Detroit. How would you say that your organization embodies the spiritual redemption of Black people?
It was created as a grassroots organization that was created in about 1986. It has been functioning as a grassroots organization with dedicated artists who believe in the vision of New Works and